Your Honor, may I be handed back State's Exhibit 107B?
Yes.
Detective Kaaiakamanu, when we left off yesterday, we had been talking about some searches linked to a Homer J. Maximus account. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you had prepared an exhibit summarizing some of the searches that you located on that account. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe we left off with the state having asked permission to publish State's 107B.
Yeah, we had the tech issue. I believe and hope that's all been sorted out. They worked on it for a while, so I think we've got things working. If those monitors don't work, also please make an indication, jurors, and you can publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I may have just a moment, let's see if I can get this fixed. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Sorry about that. Detective Kaaiakamanu, does this look like the start of the PowerPoint presentation that you created?
Yes.
And can you remind the jury, who was that Homer J. Maximus account ultimately associated with?
Alex Cox.
And if we turn to the first slide, can you see the date on there?
Yes.
And what date is that?
October 8th, 2019.
And can you remind the jurors when the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell occurred?
October 9th, 2019.
What is it about these searches on October 8th that caught your attention?
These searches, Alex Googled the 100-yard drop to 200 and 100 to 300.
And when we talk about a drop, can you explain what that is?
During shooting and sighting in your rifle with your scope, depending on how far you're out in yardage, a lot of times you will dial in that scope to a precise point of impact of your bullet. The drop of the bullet, the further you're out, the drop of the bullet tends to go down a little bit.
So essentially the idea being that from where you're standing, that's going to be where the bullet will go and where it will ultimately land or hit a target.
Correct.
And also in there, it looks like it was a 6.5 Grendel specifically.
Yes.
What kind of gun was recovered from an apartment associated with Alex Cox?
Alexander Arms 6.5 Grendel.
And then it looks like there's another date on there, October 9th of 2019. Is that correct?
Correct.
And there's some additional searches there. What about those caught your attention?
He searches just different uppers for ARs, muzzle energy brake of a 6.5 Grendel, and frog sizing of frog tog pants.
And breaking those down a little bit and actually going back to October 8th, was there anything else other than it being the 6.5 Grendel that stood out to you with these particular searches?
Not at this time to me, no.
And then on the October 9th, we've talked about the 6.5 Grendel. What about the frog tog sizing caught your attention?
There were some frog togs purchased on this same day at a different location.
And from your investigation, did you learn anything in relation to where those frog togs may have been purchased?
Yes.
And where was that?
Sportsman's Warehouse in Idaho Falls, Idaho.
Did you learn anything in relation or review anything in relation to where a device associated with Alex Cox was located that same day?
Yes.
And where was that?
Sportsman's Warehouse in Idaho Falls, Idaho.
Do you know what color those frog tog pants were?
Black.
And then when we go to the next slide, can you read the date of these searches into the record?
October 10th, 2019.
And can you explain what about these searches stood out to you?
On this day was after the attempted shooting on Tammy Daybell. And the next day, he is searching if an AR functions in cold weather, how an AR functions in cold weather. Hornady one shot shooting in cold weather. Also had a prep your AR to shoot in cold weather. He also is searching if mag rings shrink in cold weather.
Do you reside around the Fremont County area?
I do.
Have you resided there for some time?
Yes.
What are Octobers generally like in that part of the state?
Microphone, please, Mr. Pryor.
Objection, Judge. It's calling for speculation. He's talking in generalities, and he has no testimony or knowledge of what the weather was like at any time this particular year.
Your Honor, he testified that he lives in the area and has lived there for some time. I think it would be within his personal knowledge.
I'll overrule.
Thank you. If you can answer.
Can you repeat that?
What are the Octobers generally like in that part of the state?
Octobers get fairly cold in that month. Sometimes prior to that month, Octobers in eastern Idaho are hit and miss.
Do you know what the temperature was on that day?
I believe it was 26 degrees.
Judge, I'd like some foundation as to how he knew that.
Ms. Blake, knowing the precise, I agree, degree temperature would require additional foundation.
Did you do anything to look into what the temperature was that day?
I did.
What did you do?
I Googled and got on to the National Weather Service and put in that date, October 9th, 2019, to see what the temperatures were during that day.
And what were the temperatures?
26 degrees.
And if we go to the next slide, can you read the date of these searches into the record?
October 12th, 2019.
What about these particular searches caught your attention?
So this was after the attempted shooting on October 9th. On this search, he's Googling how to attach a ghillie suit, a cover to a ghillie suit. He's also Googling if a 6.5 Grendel will shoot through a windshield. He Googles the penetration through Dodge Dakota, 2008 Dodge Dakota steel body thickness, the thickness on the doors of a 2008 Dodge Dakota, and the gauge thickness of, or how thick 22 gauge steel is.
And if we break these down a little bit, can you explain what a ghillie suit is?
A ghillie suit's used a lot in the military, snipers. It's a cover that they can use for cover while in the weeds, the brush, the trees, so they're not seen.
And what about a 2008 Dodge Dakota stood out?
Tammy Daybell and Chad Daybell had a 2004 Dodge Dakota registered to them.
And again, a 6.5 Grendel was recovered from an apartment associated with Alex Cox?
Correct.
As part of your investigation, did you also look at some shooting range records?
I did.
Do you recall which shooting range you reviewed records from?
It was a sportsman's club located in St. Anthony, Idaho.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as States Exhibit 396 and 396A. Your Honor, I just handed the bailiff a courtesy copy for defense counsel, a copy for the court, and a courtesy copy for Your Honor.
All right.
And Detective Kaaiakamanu, if you just look through those particularly Exhibit 396A. And Your Honor, while he's looking through those, I believe these are a stipulated to exhibit. The first exhibit 396 would be the affidavit of business records, and exhibit 396A would be the actual logs.
That is correct, Judge.
All right. Those have been offered now and admitted. So 396 and 396A are both admitted exhibits.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
And Detective, do those appear to be the records that you reviewed?
Yes.
Were you able to determine whether or not it appeared Alex Cox had been at that gun range?
Yes.
And what did you determine?
Alex Cox didn't sign in as Alex Cox on these sheets. He did sign in as C. Quint, which C. Quint, or I should say C.P. Quint, is the license plate on his Ford F-150 truck. So on the sign-on sheet, the only letter that's missing in that is the P.
And were you able to determine how many times this C. Quint or Alex Cox had visited that gun range?
Yes.
How many times had he visited?
5 times through October 7th to the 15th of 2019.
And again, the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell was which day?
October 9th, 2019.
And what day was Tammy Daybell pronounced dead?
October 19th, 2019.
As part of your investigation, did you also review some data recovered from a phone associated with Tammy Daybell?
I did.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as States Exhibit 108. It is a affidavit of business records in relation to Tammy Daybell's phone.
Thank you.
Give us a moment, Miss Blake. We're going to verify the number here. I think we've already got 108 admitted.
Your Honor, may we approach briefly?
Yes. Actually, let me have the bailiff hand you the admitted exhibit for your review. Yeah.
All right, Your Honor, I think we have sorted that out. So State's Exhibit 108 was already admitted.
Yes.
The state would ask to have the witness shown at State's Exhibit 291.
Okay.
Do you recall reviewing that particular email?
Yes, I do.
And Your Honor, there is a stipulation to admit the contents of Tammy Daybell's phone. This is one of the items retrieved from her phone. So the state would move for admission of Exhibit 291.
Any objection?
No, Judge.
All right, Exhibit 291 is admitted.
And Your Honor, the state would ask for permission to publish.
You can publish.
And Detective, are you able to see who sent this email?
Yes.
And who was that?
Tammy Daybell from tammy.daybell@gmail.com.
And are you able to see who it was sent to?
Yes.
And who is that?
Mark Daybell at mark.daybell@missionary.org.
And can you see the date that this shows as having been sent?
Yes. On 10/13/2019 at 2:38, or correction, 2:23:18.
And Your Honor, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Okay, thank you.
And Detective, this was sent just 4 days after that attempted shooting. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when we look at that second paragraph, are you able to see approximately what time Tammy says she arrived home that night?
Yes, approximately 9:15.
And are you able to see in there, actually, let me back up. Can you read the last couple sentences there, starting with "I looked up"?
I looked up thinking it was Dad or Garth to help me carry stuff in. Nope, it was a guy dressed all in black with a ski mask on, pointing a rifle at me.
And Your Honor, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. And Detective Kaaiakamanu, could you read the paragraph starting with, "I think I was," that first full paragraph into the record?
I think I was a bit in shock because I just said, "What do you think you were doing?" Then I noticed the rifle was actually a paintball gun. It had a hopper on top. The guy started pulling the trigger, and I could hear the clicking and whooshing sound of an empty paintball gun. He stayed standing by the back of the car, just pulling the trigger while pointing the gun at me. For some reason, I just kept asking him what he thought he was doing. At that point, I was actually more annoyed than scared because he was standing between me and the door and he didn't step towards me or even say anything. The scared part came after when my brain thought of things that could have happened.
And Your Honor, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
All right.
And Detective Kaaiakamanu, could you read the last sentence of that second paragraph starting with "on Thursday night"?
On Thursday night, though, I didn't go to Zumba because I was quite understandably did not want to be out after dark alone.
And I'm going to go back to that paragraph that we were looking at previously. In there, Tammy refers to the paintball gun as a rifle. Is that correct?
Correct.
And she specifically references a hopper.
Yes.
And that's in reference to why she thought it was maybe a paintball gun.
Yes.
She also indicates the guy started pulling the trigger. Is that correct?
Yes.
In this, do you see where she indicates that she was scared?
Yes.
And in that last sentence that we just talked about, she indicated she was scared to go out alone the next night.
Yes.
And Your Honor, I'm going to ask to publish State's Exhibit 281A. It was admitted yesterday.
Okay, you can publish.
And Detective, we talked about this firearm yesterday. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And where was this recovered from?
This was recovered from Alex Cox's apartment.
And can you remind the jurors what type of firearm this is?
This is an Alexander Arms 6.5 Grendel.
And I think you have a pointer up there. But when we just looked at that email from Tammy, she specifically references a hopper or what she thought might be a hopper on the firearm. Can you again explain where on this firearm, if this were a paintball gun, where the hopper would be located?
Again, like I was referencing yesterday, the scope is on the top of the rail of the gun right here. On a paintball gun, it comes off right on the side and up right there.
So the hopper would be around the same location as this scope.
Yes.
We saw some searches about drilling a baffle to make a suppressor. Can you talk a little bit about what a suppressor is?
A suppressor is a device that can be screwed onto the end of rifles, handguns, miniguns that will make the bullet coming out quiet. Um, Sometimes people make homemade suppressors, which they have to drill holes, and you can also buy those legally.
Where on the firearm would you attach the suppressor?
The suppressor is attached right on the end of the barrel right there.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 281C, if I can have the detective shown a copy.
You may.
Detective, do you recognize that photo?
Yes.
And did you in fact take that photo?
Yes.
And what is it a photo of?
This is a photo of the end of the rifle.
A close-up photo?
Yes.
Your Honor, the state would move for admission of State's Exhibit 281C.
Any objection?
No, Judge.
Exhibit 281C is admitted.
Your Honor, may I have permission to publish?
Yes.
And officer or detective, can you tell us what we're seeing on the end of that gun?
So at the end of the rifle right there, it's threaded. Um, a lot of times there's muzzle brakes on there, or you can take that muzzle brake off and thread a suppressor onto that.
Detective Kaaiakamanu, through your investigation, did you learn anything in relation to whether or not Alex Cox was in the area of the Daybell residence on October 9th?
Yes.
And what did you learn?
A device associated with Homer J. Maximus.
Judge, foundation.
It's Blake.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Kaaiakamanu, as part of your investigation, did you review reports of other investigators?
Yes.
And did you discuss the matter with other investigators?
Yes.
And through your discussion and review, did you learn anything or review anything in relation to the location of a device associated with Alex Cox on October 9th of 2019?
Yes.
Did you learn anything in relation to a device being in the area of the Daybell residence?
Yes.
What did you learn?
On October 9th, 2019, a device that was associated with Alex Cox, known as Homer J. Maximus, was located going up and turning next to the Daybell residence and driving and making a turn and going back around the Daybell residence. This time frame was about 4:40, 4:55 p.m. to 5:03 p.m.
So 4 hours or so before the attempted shooting.
Yes.
And later in the day, that same device was at Sportsman's Warehouse in Idaho Falls. Is that correct?
Yes.
Detective Kaaiakamanu, are you aware if any paintball guns were located in the residence associated with Alex Cox?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are you aware if there were any other calls on October 9th that you found in relation to anyone else reporting a masked man pointing a rifle at them?
I did not find any.
You aware of any other reports around that time about a masked man pointing a paintball gun at anyone?
No.
So to the best of your knowledge, this was an isolated incident around this time?
Yes.
Do you recall reviewing anything in relation to some geofence location data?
Yes.
What dates did you review that in relation to?
I got those geofence warrants through October 18th into October 19th, 2019.
And again, what day was Tammy pronounced deceased?
October 19th, 2019.
Did you end up receiving responsive data in relation to the geofence?
I did.
Which specific locations did you ask for that data for October 18th to October 19th?
I did two fences, one located at 202 North, 1900 East, which is Chad and Tammy Daybell's residence. And then I did another one at 3462 Salem Highway, which is the LDS Church, just 2.6 miles south of the Daybell residence.
And with those geofence warrants, were you looking for a specific perimeter radius on those?
Yes, I did 150 meters.
And can you tell us a little bit about what data you initially got back in your request to those?
So when I requested information for data on any device coming through those through the geofences, I got a response from Google with a bunch of Google identification numbers.
What did you then do with those identification numbers? Can you talk us through that process?
Yeah. So when we write a warrant like that, Google will send back the numbers that have been going through through the geofences. They don't come back with any names. And so we then had to write another warrant with those numbers to try and find out the associated name to those devices or those numbers.
Did you locate some specific numbers that you did something with.
I did.
How many numbers caught your attention in that initial response?
So the time I had the geofence warrants up, there were 4 numbers that had gone through both geofence warrants or locations.
Did you do anything to follow up on those 4 numbers?
I did.
What did you do?
I met with Detective Stubbs, who at the time worked with Rexburg PD, and he has knowledge on how the geofence works. And we went through the numbers. 2 of the numbers.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. There hasn't been sufficient foundation to where this knowledge has come from. I've been somewhat patient.
Sustained.
Detective Kaaiakamanu, did you send in a second search warrant in relation to these geofence?
Yes.
And did you receive responsive information?
Yes.
And how many numbers did you request additional information for?
4.
And you were talking about having met with Detective Stubbs. Did Detective Stubbs initially recognize anything about those 4 numbers?
Judge, objection. That would call for hearsay.
Sustained.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Well, I would re-ask. I think it was just going to elicit hearsay.
Did you learn anything in relation to those 4 numbers prior to getting the second return?
I did, yes.
And what did you learn?
Judge, again, it may call for hearsay.
Your Honor, this goes for why the officer did what he did next in his investigation, not for the truth of the matter.
Overruled. You can answer.
I learned that one of the numbers that had come back in my geofence warrant, Detective Stubbs already had that number, which was associated with Alex Cox on a different warrant that Detective Stubbs had wrote and got information back.
And in relation to the other 3 numbers, did you end up receiving responsive data on who those devices were associated with?
I did.
Did you do follow-up on that?
I got a hold of 2 of them. One of them I could not get a hold of.
What were you able to determine in relation to those other 3 numbers?
One of them lives in the Parker area, which is north of Chad Daybell's residence. And the other one lives on Trapper Lane, which is also north of the Daybell residence.
So would it have been normal for their devices to be in that area?
Yes.
In relation to the device associated with Alex Cox, what did you learn regarding that device?
The device that was associated with Alex Cox and Homer J. Maximus, and looking through the data, the night of October 18th, 2019, that device was at the Salem Church at 10:04 that night, or 10:05 p.m.
Sometime just after 10?
Correct.
Do you know how long the device showed as being located in that vicinity?
In correctional time, I believe it was 10:07 p.m. and it showed him there until 10:45 p.m.
And when we're talking about a geofence warrant, do you know what type of data they're looking at as far as placing a device there?
I believe that is off Wi-Fi and GPS.
So with the geofence, it's located there until 10:45 p.m. of October 18th, correct?
Correct.
Did you learn anything else in relation to that device as far as any later time that night?
That device shuts off or goes dormant and is no longer there. And it is later picked up at 11:53, roughly 7 miles south of the church.
Judge, could we identify what church he's talking about?
And is this the same church that you previously referenced?
Correct, the Salem Church.
And again, how far is the Salem Church from the Daybell residence?
2.6 miles.
So we know a device associated with Alex Cox is there from 10:07 to 10:45 p.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
And from there, we're not sure where the device is
Correct.
until 11:53 p.m.
Correct.
And at 11:53 p.m., can you remind us again where that's located?
It was located about 7 miles south of the Salem Church on Highway 20.
Through your investigation, did you learn who the last person besides Chad Daybell to see Tammy would have been?
Garth Daybell.
And through your investigation, did you learn where Garth Daybell was on the night of October 18th of 2019? Or yeah, October 18th of 2019?
He was at work.
Through your investigation, did you learn if he was at work all night?
I believe he got off around 1 o'clock in the morning.
Do you know where he was working?
He worked at that time, he was working at the Haunted Mill.
And what is the Haunted Mill?
It's October. The Haunted Mill is a haunted, scary attraction.
And it's seasonal.
Seasonal, yes.
When you looked at that geofence, did you get any return on a device associated with Chad Daybell?
No,
Not at either location.
no.
Did you later learn where Chad had indicated he was on October 18th into the morning hours of October 19th?
From other deputies' reports, he had told them that he had been home.
And yet no device was located in relation to Chad Daybell.
Correct.
So in your review, there's location data placing a device associated with Alex Cox near the Daybell residence on October 9th of 2019, correct?
Yes.
And on the night of October 18th of 2019?
Yes.
Were you able to find any connection between Alex Cox and Tammy Daybell?
No.
Were you able to determine who Alex Cox knew in that area?
At that time, no. The only person that I was aware of would be Chad Daybell.
Through your investigation, did you become aware of some emails from Charles Vallow that he'd sent to an email that he sent to Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
Did you also become aware of an email Charles Vallow sent to Chad Daybell?
Yes.
Do you recall what the content or what the gist of the email that he sent to Tammy was about?
The email that was sent to Tammy was on June 29th, 2019. And Charles was reaching out to her school address, email address, and telling her that he had some information about an affair going on. He didn't go into too much detail because he didn't want to explain all that over email, and left Tammy his number to have Tammy call him.
And through your investigation, were you ever able to determine whether or not Tammy Daybell had contact with Charles Vallow?
I was not able to confirm that.
And in relation to the email Charles sent to Chad Daybell, do you recall the gist or content of that?
Yes.
And what was that about?
So Charles sent on the same day an email to Chad, telling Chad that he was aware of what was going on between him and his wife, and Chad needed to tell his wife, or Charles was gonna expose them. He was also aware that Lori had sent him some dance videos of her, and that was inappropriate.
Through your investigation, did you learn whether Chad and Lori were married?
Yes.
And what did you learn?
I learned that they got married November 5th, 2019.
And again, Tammy Daybell was pronounced dead on October 19th of 2019.
Yes.
Do you know when her funeral was?
October 22nd, 2019.
So just 3 days later.
Yes.
And I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Cross-examination.
Judge, would you like me to start or do you want to take a break?
Why don't you go ahead and start and we'll take a break here in about 20 minutes or so, if that works. Can we have the microphone, please?
Officer, if you would allow me to either call you Officer K or I'm going to mispronounce your name for the next 25 minutes.
That Officer K is okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, officer, you took the liberty of let me find this. Going through talking about your report about the emails between Mark Daybell and Tammy. Is that right?
Yes.
And Judge, I believe that was Exhibit 291. And if I could have 291.
Yes, we'll have the bailiff hand that to you or to the witness, Mr. Pryor.
Okay.
Which?
Just to me. And Judge, if I could have permission to just publish.
You may publish that.
And officer, if you could tell me the date of that email.
10/13/2019.
Okay. And then that was obviously Dear Marky. That would be Tammy's son.
Yes.
Okay. And the very first sentence, it said, on Wednesday during the day, a lady pulled into the Price's driveway, grabbed their dog, drove off, right?
Yes.
And then she went on to talk about what transpired about that and about where they tried to locate where the lady lived. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Now, from your investigation, were you able to determine where Regan Price lives?
Yes.
Where's Regan Price live?
Regan Price lives directly south of Chad Daybell's house.
Okay. And then that would be directly east of Joe Murray's house.
Correct. Yes.
So if we have if we can visualize this, we have Chad Daybell's property. And approximately how big is Chad Daybell's property? Do you know?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. It's a more than an acre.
Yes.
Okay. And directly across the street from Chad Daybell's property is another house, correct?
Yes.
And then kitty corner to the south and to the west would be Joe Murray, right?
Yes.
And directly southeast of Chad's property would be Regan Price. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay, so 4 houses all kitty corner from each other. And this is more of a rural setting. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And the houses are all on larger plots of property, correct?
Yes.
But the houses themselves are relatively close in terms of location. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
All of the houses on that particular corner, we heard on the 911, there was something about a flashing yellow light And on that very corner, that's where all the 4 residences are located, pretty much on the corner of each of those, that intersection, right?
Yes.
Okay. So relatively close together are these homes. That we've established that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the close neighbors is this lady by the name of Regan Price, correct?
Yes.
And she talked about how somebody um, pulled into their driveway and grabbed their dog. Do you recall when that took place?
Well, in this email, she's writing it on the 13th about the night of the attempted shooting. So I'm assuming it was on the 9th.
Okay, so if you look at the very first line to her, she's writing this on the 13th to her son, which was a short time after the paintball incident. She says on Wednesday, during the day with Reagan outside. So can we presume that it was that Wednesday of that week?
Yes.
Okay. So at that point, somebody grabbed Reagan Price's dog, took off, stole the dog, and disappeared, correct?
Yes.
And then now she says on the same day, you look down below to the second paragraph, right? You see that?
Yep. Yes.
She was coming home from clogging. It was about 9:15 and she backed into the driveway. Okay. So the nose of her car was facing out of the driveway, correct?
Yes.
Now, what I'd like to know is, you've been out to the house, right?
Yes.
And how long of a driveway is that?
The front driveway, and I haven't measured it, but maybe,
I can make it easier for you if we could do it in
yeah,
terms of an analysis. Would you be able to park 3 cars back to back in that driveway and not have any of them sticking out into the road?
maybe 2.5 to 3. Yeah.
Okay, 2.5 to 3 cars, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and from your experience as a police officer, do you know the length of what the average automobile would be?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. But if we took the size of an average automobile and we multiplied it times 2.5, that's how much space we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And if you were looking at this bench in front of us, how many cars would you say could, where the jury's sitting, how many cars could you push back to back in front of this bench?
Probably about 2.
Okay, so if we're asking about 2.5, would it be fair to say that the driveway was from the end of that bench to where this officer is?
Possibly.
Okay, so that's the length of the driveway. And at that point, from what I understand, according to this document, to Mark, she was getting some items out of the back seat and realized someone was at the back of the car. So she backed her car in and someone was behind her car. That would be near the garage. Is that the way you're reading that?
Behind her car, yes.
Okay, so someone was behind her car near the garage. She looked up thinking it was Dad or Garth to help her. Nope, it was a guy dressed in black with a ski mask on pointing a rifle at me. And she did say the word rifle, didn't she?
Yes.
Okay. Then she went on to talk about that she was in shock because what do you think you were doing? Then the next line was starting with then. Would you read that next line for me?
Then I noticed the rifle was actually a paintball gun. It had a hopper on top.
Okay. Now, you know what a hopper is, right?
Yes.
You've seen a hopper?
Yes.
You know a hopper is different than a rifle scope, right?
Yes.
And you know that, Judge, I'm going to. So in any event, you know that a hopper is a little different than a rifle scope, right?
Yes.
And you know that a hopper is a large composite of some kind container, right?
It's plastic container.
A big
Yes.
plastic container, right?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that it would be very difficult to confuse a hopper with a rifle scope, right?
I wouldn't agree with you on that if you're
Okay.
not sure what a rifle is with a scope on it or a
Okay.
paintball gun with a hopper.
Did you happen to go over the report of Coulter Cannon?
I did.
Did you happen to go over uh, or discuss the case with Coulter Cannon?
A little bit, yes.
Okay. Were you aware that when Coulter Cannon came up to the residence of Tammy and Chad Daybell, that he went in the house and looked at one of the Google searches that Tammy was performing prior to the police arriving? Do you remember that?
I was not aware of that.
Okay. Or did you happen to look at Tammy's email and searches on that computer to determine whether Tammy had looked at anything prior to the police arriving?
Not on her computer, no.
Okay. Were you aware that Officer Cannon walked up to the computer with Garth Daybell and Tammy Daybell and proceeded to look at pictures of paintball guns?
I was not aware of that.
Were you aware that during the Google search by Tammy Daybell that she pointed to the actual paintball gun that she saw the gentleman holding that day?
I was not aware of that.
Okay. Were you not aware of that because Coulter Cannon didn't include that information in his report well, not in his first report, right? That wasn't included in his first report, was it?
I didn't read that in his report.
Right. You didn't read it in his supplemental report either when he chose to supplement the report, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Judge, previously we had stipulated to the admission of Defense Exhibit 14.
Okay, has it been offered or admitted yet, Mr.
I'm
Pryor?
going to offer it now, Judge, and ask that it be admitted. It was agreed to by stipulation.
Has the state reviewed Exhibit 14?
We have, Your Honor, but if I can be reminded of exactly what it is.
It's the Google.
All right.
It's
Counsel.
the searches, yes.
Well, let's do this. I want to go ahead and that may take a moment. I think it's a logical breaking point for our mid-morning recess.